Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
All right, welcome back to the show. We've got a great guest with us today. We've got Mr. Chuck Drobny with the GlobaLogix Corporation here in Houston, Texas, and he's going to share with us how he helps his clients with his product and his business. And he's got a lot of great nuggets for us today. So welcome to the show, Chuck.
Thank you for having me, Alan. Pleasure to be here.
You're welcome, and thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man, so let's get right into it. So tell us a little bit about your business and what types of customers or clients that you help.
Well, what we've been doing is we've been engineering solutions connecting the world of our customers, and we're one of those that never tells a customer that part of the job that they need done we can't do. So as far as their problem exists, we're willing to embrace as much or as little bit of it as the customer wants. I'm happy to bundle or unbundle whatever piece fits the customer. Now, you may look and say, well, what is it that you're doing? We're essentially taking the instrumentation and control issues. These are the temperatures, the pressures, the tank levels, the valve indicators, the flow measures, all the kinds of physical parameter measurements that an individual may use for his process, whether that be oil wells that connect into pads and go into pipelines and go through processing plants, or in another aspect of our business, we do similar things with agricultural feed processing plants. Each one of these guys, each one of these operators has some sort of system that's in place, and generally they find that there's some inadequacy to that system. And they either have legacy hardware that is no longer supported by the manufacturer, or they have some spaghetti Brillo-looking mess of wires and connections that they're not quite sure where they come from or where they go. And they're dealing in a lot of instances with analog and visual gauges and measurements that they feel they need to have them automated so that when the valve needs to be turned up because the temperature has gone up, instead of somebody looking at a sight glass and then turning a hand crank, they want to be able to turn around and have that valve electrically actuated according to that pressure or temperature. That's pretty much a simple thing. If the tank starts to get almost too full, it needs to shut off the pump and stop filling it up. For a lot of companies, these processes are manually monitored and measured. So they look at how they might do what they read about in the magazines and the kind of systems that they want to have. And they sit back and say, I have no idea how to put this together. I have no idea who could even come and look at the mess that we have. I have no idea how I could find somebody who could take and work with equipment that's 5 years old on one end of my process and 10 years old on my other. So it's sometimes difficult to give it to you in a simple set of words, but we say that we engineer solutions connecting your world. Whatever part of that world they're concerned about that they need to deal with today, that's what we deal with.
That's a great response, Chuck. So how did you really get started in this field, and how did you get started doing this type of business?
I've been doing maintenance of equipment and operation of equipment in a variety of industries for a number of years. I was one of the first people in the inland marine industry to take some of the new instrumentation and computer equipment and actually put together programs that could help riverboats and offshore supply boats operate. We learned how to measure things like fuel and speed and position and location. And from there, I started taking off-the-shelf computer equipment or whatever was available and putting it together in combinations that would work in the industrial environment. That was a software company that we had. I was fortunate enough to be able to sell that company. And later on, I had an individual who contacted me, having worked before. He was getting into the oil and gas service business and gave me a phone call, and I left Tennessee and came to Texas and started working in the oil and gas business. I found that the differences were not as severe as I thought. I recognized that even though there were hundreds of oil wells out there, no two would be alike. Just like I had found in the riverboat business that even two riverboats built by the same shipyard on the same line didn't come out the same way. And we started hiring people because they had relationships with customers who needed to have this equipment installed in their oil wells or on their oil pads. We found the company, and company was founded in 2004. They brought me in 2006. We were at about a little under $500,000 in revenue when I got here. In the following year, we hired a lot of people, brought a lot of processes in, and we brought it up to about $2.5 million after that first year. Early, we were at one point in time the fastest growing company, technology and service company in the city of Houston. We made the Inc. I think we were in the top 40 for the Inc. 50 or whatever it was 1 year. So we had quite a spectacular growth, but pretty much did it by taking those off-the-shelf products, putting them together, engineering the solutions, and not sitting down and saying, look, I have the one-size-fits-all solution for you. What we do instead is we say, let's sit down with you and identify what it is you think you want. I'll start to describe to you, our engineers will describe to you how we get there. And you'll start to change your expectations just by going through that process. And we'll work with you so that by the time you get what you want, you'll have looked back and said, this isn't what I thought I was going to look for in the beginning. So it was a combination of opportunity. I've never really felt like I needed to be doing tomorrow what I did yesterday. I guess answered the question for a long time. I really don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And but I guess the skill set is identifying, problem solving, and bringing other people along with it. Now, we've been in oil and gas since 2006 when I got here. And then last year we recognized that we had an opportunity to provide some electrical service to an agricultural feed processing plant. And when we got there, we saw what the situation was, and we fixed their electrical problem. But then I sent some engineers back on our dime because I thought they'd be interested in some other service work. And things started to grow again. I'd like to be able to claim infinite predictive knowledge as to where the next big boom is going to come, but we were just flat lucky in both instances, on the oil and gas side and on this. I will say that I know how to exploit success. I'm not really going to claim wisdom over luck. I guess I'd rather be lucky than smart when it comes to finding new opportunities, but I also know that the harder that you work, the luckier you get.
Nice. Now, I understand, could you talk about a little bit about your West Point experience? Do you feel that kind of sets you up for success?
I think it set me up for understanding who I was and in the context of my peers as to how to start to influence other people. I realized through that I was not a very good bureaucracy participant. I really have to not separate West Point from my time in the Army. I think Ranger School and becoming qualified as a Ranger and was just as significant in terms of its impact upon me as West Point was, and they both were. And in the Army experience, nobody was shooting at me in the Army, and there was no war going on, and quite frankly, I was getting a little bored. And I didn't function real well inside the organization. When there was a problem, they gave me the problem to solve. We got called as an infantry battalion in Hawaii to open up a refugee camp for the Vietnamese that were fleeing Saigon when the regime fell. I was given the task with 4 other people of getting on an airplane real fast and going to Guam and establishing the basis to accept our battalion, all of its equipment, and all of its people to operate a refugee camp that didn't exist. We had about 72 hours to do that, so we went and embraced the problem, and that was right up my alley. Go in with my hair on fire, identify what I thought had to be done, do something, get other people moving in a specific direction, and identify problems as they came up rather than trying to predict them and avoid them before they got to me. So to that extent, I was somewhat reactive. West Point taught me how to think in a swirling maelstrom of conflicting ideas. It taught me that you had to be able to sift through with a singularity of purpose identify what the other person wanted and what you had to do to get them to change their behavior in the direction you wanted. And to that extent, I probably still do that with our customers. I can't sell something to a customer who doesn't have a need or a desire. But just because he has a need or desire doesn't necessarily mean he's going to buy from me. I've got to be able to show them something that they didn't know about before, some wow factor, some interesting way to solve the problem that then responds to what it is they're trying to deal with right now, rather than some strange ROI calculation that I have in the back of my head.
No, that's fine. That's great. Thank you for your service. We thank you very much for serving our country. I really appreciate that. Along the way, I'm sure you had people that influenced you or had inspired you along the way. Can you remember or recall anybody specifically?
The biggest influencer on me has been my wife, who has given me the ability to sometimes understand that there's intuitive logic and there's indirect processes as methods of arriving at solutions to problems that don't necessarily have to be as straightforward as the ones that I look at. I became a Christian in my early 30s and recognized that I could fail in life and still be successful in my soul. So that gave me a confidence that I didn't have to prove myself on the battlefield or on the business field. You know, other individuals. I've worked for some managers who showed me how to, the managers who showed me that they'd give me a task, either an objective or a process, but they'd never give me both. I've tried to follow through on that. I worked for a man one time who told me that we had to do our job and please our boss. And that became two of the fundamentals that I tell all of our employees these days, which is you have to do your job, you have to please your boss, and you have to get along with everybody. And those are the formulas for success. I pick up little bits and pieces from different folks. I liked General McChrystal, who, when somebody asks about, when he asks somebody about when they can get something done, he looks at his watch instead of his calendar. Pete Dawkins, who had a successful career in the military and then in business. I remember him telling me about compressing time frames. That was pretty important. My father-in-law, who was the kindest and gentlest man I've ever known, who taught me that I don't necessarily have to be a hard-nosed guy all the time. But a specific mentor, I pick and choose from a lot of different sources. I read a lot. I listen to a lot. And I disagree a lot with people.
There you go. Well, that's some great insight. I appreciate you sharing that with the audience. So what about, you just mentioned books. And I know every entrepreneur that I speak to are insatiable readers, but what book stands out that's really impacted you along the way?
The Old Testament, probably the first one.
Nice.
You can get more out of the book of Proverbs than you can out of any business book. I probably have some pieces of books that I vehemently disagree with, and I kind of go counterculture to that. I got into a prolonged email dialogue with Jim Collins about Good to Great because he and I disagreed about some fundamental things. I think we finally agreed to disagree. But is there one book that I keep on my nightstand that I tell everybody that they should read? No, I think that there's more benefit in reading great literature for settling the mind and stirring the soul than there is. Business books tell you how to stir the mind and settle the soul, and I don't think that's how you get successful. I think you have to settle the mind and stir the soul, because it's the passion that causes people to have the drive, that causes them to solve the unsolvable problem or influence the unreachable person.
Well, that leads us right into the next question. Talk about what drives you and gives you the passion to do what you do, to help people.
I very much want to be looked upon as knowing what I'm doing and doing things for other people, so that people look upon me and say, I like that guy and I respect what he's doing. I don't have any crisis or failure or thing that motivates me. I don't have a family member that I lost by some malaise that I wanted to cure. I don't have a mission that I have. I know for me personally, I've been rich and I've been poor, and I much prefer the rich part. I've been gainfully employed, and I've also been looking for work. I felt the frustration and the fear of not being able to provide for my family. And I think that probably the one internal motivator is to keep our employees' families fed and clothed and well cared for. Probably is a big underlying driver. I like solving problems, and I like struggling through problems. For a while there in my life, I had achieved some accomplishments, some goals, and I thought, well, once I get to achieve that goal, I can sit back and relax. And I found after doing that a few times that I was still pretty restless. And it finally dawned on me that it was the struggle, and it was the fight, and it was being engaged that really was motivating me and keeping me going. So I tend to go from one problem to the next, all the while, never being bored. I tend to have an eclectic interest in taste and stuff. There's some things I don't do at all. I'm not real conscious about music or art, but I can appreciate pieces. Probably that eclectic taste is most reflected in what I read. I read a wide combination of motivational things, business things, spiritual things, history, cheap novels, biography. Yeah, tough question. What motivates me and gets me going? I think it's staying in the fight.
Perfect. When people come to seek you out, what is the most common obstacle that's preventing them to achieving the outcome that they're trying to get to, of connecting the dots of what you're doing or how you can help them?
Having enough confidence that our organization can walk them through a process of self-discovery for themselves and their organization as to what it is that they're really looking to do, and that we're really trying to help them uncover what it is that they need and want, and then deliver that solution, as opposed to using some sort of facade to say, I'm asking you what you really need, but my agenda is really to deliver you the solution that I have in the back office. We find that a lot. Those people who turn around and say, this is what I really need to have done, and this is what I'm really looking for, and then they follow through and they work with us, we're able to overcome it. So it's kind of getting past that barrier. I think it's probably the same barrier that you have, was talking to different clients. You turn around and say, look, if you just tell me what it is that you want to do and tell me about yourself, I will help drive you toward what your objectives are, as opposed to my objectives. And that's probably the biggest barrier. Those people we get those relationships with, we do real well. We deliver their solutions. We solve their problems. We get the heck out of the way, and they pay us for it.
Can you tell us a quick story or describe how you've helped a customer or a client achieve what you're helping them achieve?
Well, let me tell you two. One long-term and one of a short-term.
Perfect.
Long-term, we have a oil and gas customer who operates a pipeline. And they were taking a pipeline from Oklahoma to El Paso, and they wanted to reverse the flow. Now, that's a pretty big issue because the elevation is downhill from Oklahoma, but it's uphill from Texas. So they had to put in a lot of pumping stations and river crossings and control stations, and this requires a fair bit of sensors and control panels and data collection devices that all integrate into their network operations center. So these were, 8 by 12 panels. So what we knew about this customer was they were constantly shifting their managerial and their technical staff from one region to another, from one pumping station to another. And they recognized that they had issues where when a new manager came into a facility, he would start to change policies and protocols and methods, or he would take time just to learn what the equipment was in the new location. We suggested to them that we give them a process where we were able to establish for them definite procedures on how to build each one of those stations, what the standards were for construction, how to build the control narratives so that we could build the programs, how to document all of this stuff and what the documentation should look at, and then what the startup procedure should be. And we focused a little bit more on the procedure side. They accepted that, and since about 2007, we've been building all their panels and all their procedures, and they've been able to move people from one station to the next or one region to the next, and they haven't lost any productivity. because of the lag time that they've had. So, we've built about 75 or 80 of these facilities, and they all work well. They function as they should, but they all look and operate in a similar pattern. So in a way, they really had an HR problem. They didn't have as much of a technical problem. We gave them a technical solution and helped them with their HR problem. So that's the first one. The second one is a agricultural feed mill up in Abilene. And this is a large multinational company that operates this mill. And they operate 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week. They shut down on the weekend, and they have some pretty rigid production standards where if they're down for a few days, they got a real problem. Well, they had a pellet mill, and the pellet mill it essentially takes a mash of grain and makes those little rabbit-looking pellets that you feed to the animals in bags. They had a pellet mill that just wasn't functioning well. The control system for that mill was 15 or 20 years old. The manufacturer would not upgrade the facility anymore. And they had a mass of wires, Alan, that looked like multicolored Brillo. I mean, I could show you the pictures of this. And it was just the most god-awful nightmare collage of wires. But the other issue they had was the last time they had done a changeover on software and hardware for one of those mills, the mill was down for 10 weeks. We came in and we said, look, here's how you engineer this process. We did some surveys, we did some inspections, then we built the panels to control what they needed. We then went back in and we put in new wireways next to the old wireways. We made them come down for a functional accept test where we went through the whole control scenario. These are things that they'd never had done before. Somebody would just hand them a set of drawings and hand them a CD and say, here, you go put it in. They had a maintenance shutdown over the Memorial Day weekend. It was important for us. I was up there watching what was going on. I'd had engineers and technicians in there a week to 10 days in advance to do a lot of preliminary work. We sited the new box that we had already built and tested. And then when they shut down on Friday night, we started disconnecting the old stuff, reconnecting the new wires. And we were supposed to be up by Monday afternoon so they could do a test run on Tuesday. And we had our mill up for them by Sunday afternoon. And then we stuck around. I left an engineer there on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday afternoon. He finally came home because he wanted to make sure the startup worked. So here you had a company that had an electromechanical problem. They needed an upgrade. They didn't know how to do it. But more importantly, the problem was they couldn't risk taking that facility down for more than their normal plant turnaround. So we gave them a different approach. That solved their real underlying problem, but also delivered the technical solution that they needed to control the mill.
Beautiful. The most important thing the listener should think about when considering upgrading their technology and making that shift, what should be the most important thing they should think about?
Putting their own hedge around how complicated and how detailed and how all-encompassing they want the solution to be. I have an expression that says, customers don't know what they want until after they get it. And as we bring them through the process, they're not simply shopping a catalog and saying, I want one of those, item number 2305. They turn around and they describe the solution that they have. We show them something that's similar. And then we sit down and we start to ask them questions about how they operate, how they want to change their operation, what they want to do. And to be simplistic, I'll say something like, do you want that in red or green? And all of a sudden he drops his pen and he says, oh my gosh, it comes in colors?
Yeah.
And we say, yeah, we can give it to you in colors. And they go, now they start talking about one in purple, one in orange, one in yellow. So what happens is we've changed the paradigm of what they think they can do in the process of trying to give them the solution to what their problem is. And it's not uncommon for that paradigm shifting experience to take off and eventually even infect the installation process. So we've been on facilities in oil and gas where we're installing something that was designed and desired. And when the field superintendent comes around, starts adding little ones and zeros to it, or little bits and pieces to it, and start to become a little bit more complicated, a little more complicated. And before you know it, the costs are out of hand, the time's out of hand. and they've commissioned something that's twice as large as what they thought in the first place. So in order for these guys to control costs, they got to put a box around it, or allow us to help them put a box around it, plan it, and then execute it.
Yeah, you end up a little scope drift there if you're not careful, but excellent advice. So if somebody's ready to get started with you and your company, what would be the first thing they would do?
First thing they would do is they would describe to us what the problem is that they're trying to solve. Listen, I recognize that as much as we want to be technical, all purchase decisions are fundamentally emotional decisions. There's something that's bothering them, something that's going on. They can't risk the shutdown. They don't want to get called out in the middle of the night. They wound up with a failure that cost them a ton of money over and above the operational stuff. This isn't about efficiency usually. Well, we spend a little bit now and we'll save a little bit more later on. Most of these purchases are made because there's some emotional issue. But the justification for that purchase is always cognitive, where the decision is always emotional. First step then is tell us what it is that's causing you to want to make this decision. And then what we will do is we send engineers in and we survey the facility and give them a plan of what the consequences are that they have to do. They may, by that survey, we may be able to tell them up front, you have wiring in there that has to come out because it's not up to code, or because it's irregular, or because it's broken. Or you have mountings for these pumps that have to be changed because if you want to put motor controllers on them, the weight won't support them. We do a survey, and that gives us an idea as to what the retrofit is going to look like and what the problems are going to be. And usually from that survey, which they pay for, we wind up giving them a document that shows what they have, and we give them an estimate and a game plan as to how to make the change. Theoretically, they could take that game plan to a competitor and say, here, I had this survey done, and this is what I want you to do. Now, in some instances, we had one customer where we did the survey, and my engineers came back before the survey was finished because there were some terribly unsafe conditions that we found and discovered. I had occasion to go one-on-one with the regional manager and talk to him and tell him what we found. And as his words were, I am terribly embarrassed by the fact that this is going on in one of my plants. And we actually were able to point out to them in a pretty safe way some things that they didn't know about, and they got them fixed. From there, from the survey, we then turn around and give them a quote, and then they turn around and decide whether or not they got the money for it.
I'm sure you get lots of inquiries about safety situations and how you can eliminate safety issues. I mean, that plays a major role in what you're doing, correct?
Well, I find that the primary reason that somebody will start to spend money, even if it's not budgeted, is either government regulation or safety. The second reason is to stop an operational loss. And actually, efficiency, what most people think that we should be selling on the basis of in industrial sales, efficiency is down the list as number 4. Third one is they'll buy so they can increase their revenue with their existing asset base. But efficiency plays a pretty low role in something like safety for some organizations. So we've been around organizations. I was around one company where there was an irregular discharge of distillate that washed both of my technicians in a bath of distillate. This faulty valve, and the company knew about it. The valve is still faulty, and my guys aren't going anywhere near that site. Now, I say not everybody is as safe as they profess.
What's the best way for someone to learn more about your company and to contact you to get started?
Give us a phone call and ask us to come out to your place so we can walk around and see it, so we can look you in the eye and identify what really sounds important and really isn't important, and so you can look us in the eye and make an assessment as to whether or not we're full of crap or not. We do deal in contracts and purchase orders and official documents, but fundamentally there's a trust factor that has to start to be established. The best way for people to see that trust is warranted is to just see how we assess the situation, how we assess the individual at his facility, what we walk around and look at, what kind of questions that we ask. And then we can tell them, the stories about the customers that we have. And in some instances, they'll turn around and talk to those customers. But the first assessment is they got to look our guys in the eye and decide whether or not they can begin to want to give us a chance to trust us.
So where can they find, what's your website and your phone number?
Our website is globlx.com, and the phone number is 713-987-7630. My Facebook page is up. Our company Facebook page is up. Our LinkedIn contacts and everything else. There's a video that we're real proud of that's on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and search for GlobaLogix, that's GlobaLogix, you'll see about a 3-minute video about some of the stuff that we're doing in the agricultural business. And it's very revealing as to what our approach is, how thorough that approach is, and how that essentially solves the problem because we designed the solution to fit the problem.
Excellent. Chuck, thank you very much for the interview and being with us today. And we've really enjoyed it, and you've given lots of great information about how you relieve a pain in the marketplace. So thank you very much.
Well, swell. Thanks for having me. And anybody that wants to talk to me, one of my goals with my customers is or potential clients is I want to get to the word no, N-O, as quickly as possible. So I want to find out if there's something that we can't do for you or where that limit is, so that I don't waste their time and they don't waste mine. And I find that if I find out where no is right away and we walk out the door, a lot of times 2 years later or 2 months later, it suddenly becomes a yes, and we get the phone call and they've already done their due diligence. So thanks for having me.
I like that. Thank you. There you have it for this edition of the show. We'll see you the next time.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.